do like a good bit of grammar. So when people put your instead of your with an E.
It's kind of like it's a really basic one, that one, isn't it?
Or T-O, when it should be
T-double-O.
O.
Okay, right, so this is week 2. Last time we were here, we spoke about week 1 and we were going through Sally's blog, which you've been writing, still writing, but we've just changed the format to reduce it slightly. So we're going into week 2. Okay, so I think a good place to start is we've had week 1, we've had the excitement, the hubbub, the kind of like, what can we do? We've got staff here, we're working through like these whole processes of what does it look like to be part of Dementia Support when we can't do what we normally do. And we've had the weekend, and now we're into week 2. Where are you at this point?
Depressed.
Okay.
It's very clear when I look back at week 2 that I think what happened was there was this sudden realisation that everything that I'd been planning for the last 6 months was gone, essentially. There were no customers. Normally that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, seeing the customers come through the door and that excitement, and realising that just all the plans around how we were going to grow, how we were going to celebrate for the normal 5-week period. And there was just this realisation that none of that was going to happen anymore. And the news coming out was getting worse and worse from government. There was it was that point, it was like, no, you are in lockdown. And this is going to go on for a long time.
Yeah. I think by that time, you'd been with us for a couple of months, you'd been working in an office full of people, and you had met one of our sort of infamous couples that had helped us with our campaign earlier on to set sort of dementia services up. We'll call them A and B for now. But at that point, you had heard some like news about A and how she was feeling. How did that make you feel?
That was hard because as part of the campaign, we'd grown really close. We'd spent a lot of time getting to understand their story, probably even more so than we would do normally. And B had gone into a residential home, and A was in a position where all of a sudden she couldn't go and see him. And given this is a couple who have been married for 50 years, and what she was getting was phone calls from the home saying that B had been in some difficulties and his behaviour was changing, and there was nothing she could do about that, and she had no way of venting it either. The communications were really challenging with the home as well, in that they were finding it difficult to explain exactly what had happened. And she was in this position where she just wasn't able to influence the situation in any way.
And so she'd taken government guidance by this point, hadn't she? So A had taken government guidance to put B in sort of safety and things like that, and then that decision meant actually she was removed from that process moving forwards.
Yeah.
And that made that situation for her, after looking after B for such a long time, must have been such a horrible realisation.
Yep. And I think disbelief for her, this man that she'd looked after and cared for, since his diagnosis of Alzheimer's probably 7 years ago, and the caring that she'd done for him, suddenly he's removed from her life, literally.
Wow.
Yeah, all she's hearing about are the really distressing things, and knowing he's in distress. And of course, the whole mood within the home would have been one of distress, no relatives being able to visit any of their loved ones. So, and then that kind of we then had to think about, well, how can we support her through this? And you know, we had a lot of conversations amongst the staff team, and I ended up going to the home in the end and just saying, you know, essentially, look, I'm a real person for a start. I work for this organisation. Our job is to support A, which is what we really want to do. So actually, if there are problems with B in the home, then you ring us, and then we'll decant that information to A. But at the same time, we'll have the opportunity to talk to her at length, to reassure her, and to make sure that she has the opportunity to offload.
Yeah.
And that's what it was all about, and that's why she was becoming so frustrated.
Yeah.
Is because she was just being hit with the bad stuff and being left to get on with it.
Yeah. So Diane, so like we said earlier on, you've been here for 2 months, and I guess you've been in and around, and you've been part of the services, you've got to know stuff. How were you kind of feeling at this point, knowing, like, you've seen what Dementia Support does in action, you see what it does day to day, and then now kind of seeing those people that you've seen and the carers you've seen, how are you feeling at this point?
Well, it was just disbelief, really, I think, because I hadn't been here that long, but I did feel that I'd spent a lot of time in the day breaks, you know, and in the activities and getting to know the staff and the customers. And to go from heaving and me bringing around business people, you know, doing my corporate partnerships role, bringing them around, showing them around Sage House, the excitement of the place, and seeing how they became involved, because I was showing them what we do here, and they just didn't believe, you know, how amazing it was, and wanted to support us. We were talking about what they could do in the future. I'd gone from literally doing that in a buzz to it just gone. Everything had just gone. And the fact that I knew through all the other staff that the carers, some of them were going to be at home alone now, and also some home alone with the customers with no support, shocking. It was horrible. I felt really despondent, like everyone else. Yeah, what can we do? But actually, what can we do? It wasn't a great week, to be fair.
No, and I think, you know, out of those times that were, you know, I think times that we were able to put our head together as a, you know, a wider team and looked at other things. So that's where our befriending service had been thought about. But actually, that was the week that we decided, right, we are going to publicise this along with our wayfinding service. We're going to provide a free telephone service for people, not just people living with dementia and their carers, but actually people who are over 65. And that week, I think we managed to design the leaflet, get it sent off, and get it back. How long did it take before we started to receive the first customers for befriending?
So the first referral for befriending came through that week, actually. And it was a referral for befriending, but I think what became really clear all of a sudden is that whilst it originally presented, if you like, as somebody who just needed, and I say just needed because it's a huge thing, but who needed a friendly ear and a bit of a conversation maybe once or twice a week, it really became clear quickly that there was a lot more underlying issues there.
Right.
And that actually, whilst it was a feeling of maybe loneliness starting to come out, actually the issue was one of the same as us, what we were going through, the disbelief, the emotional distress, the realisation that they weren't going to see their family for any length of time. And at the same time, actually, it was the daughter who'd been in contact with us, and I think she was in Australia, I think it was, that had been in contact to say, look, I'm really worried about my mum who lives locally to you, who all of a sudden has no one. She can't go and talk to her neighbours or anything else. So it started off as a befriending, or it presented as a befriending call, but actually it turned out to be a wayfinding call, and we spent a lot of time working with the lady, getting her set up with all sorts of the befriending service, but also lots of other services to really sort of support her during this time. So,
and I guess this goes without saying, but actually you know, we have a great wayfinding team, and we've got a great staff at the moment who are working at home. How have you managed?
The thing that's been really key for us is, and because of what we do, is offload. It's a lot of what we hear, you know, especially now as time is moving on, can be quite distressing situations, and the important thing in those scenarios is that the team have the opportunity to offload with one another.
Right.
So that's kind of what we are encouraging, and what happens probably, it almost is happening more regularly now than it might even be face to face, because it becomes a bit of a routine of, I've just had a really difficult conversation with somebody, I feel quite distressed as a result of that conversation, although of course we have clear boundaries. But then it's a case of, who can I speak to just chat through and make sure that I've done what I needed to do, and that I get out. And that's what it's about, is how do you enable yourself to get out the emotion from within, so that it doesn't then just fester within the individual.
You're quite new here, but actually you've been in contact with our wayfinders probably way more now in the last few weeks through what you've been doing with the packs than ever before. So how's that been, talking to them and getting to know them over the phone, as it were?
Yeah, obviously it's different. I mean, I did speak to them when they were here and found out, you know, about what they were doing and how they were, you know, dealing with the customers and carers and what their relationship was. And I just think it's apparent within all of us that we're all struggling in our own different ways. You know, they're doing their utmost to still give that support, and I'm sure they are. But I think, like all of us, we all need some support as well. And I can't imagine that their role now is probably a lot harder than it was before, and it was always going to be a difficult role anyway. But I would have thought, at least if you've got that person in front of you, the empathy that you can have by just being there must be completely different to just being able to do it on the phone. So they're doing an amazing job. I hats off to them.
Completely. And I think it's interesting, and what's interesting is the issues are so different compared to what they would have been 3 months ago. So a lot of the conversations we'd have been having 3 months ago would have been things around Dad's driving licence is going to get taken away from him. That's going to have an impact upon his health and his emotional well-being. How do we manage that situation? So we're suddenly going from those types of scenarios, which are incredibly challenging to deal with when you're faced with them, but to suddenly, my dad wants to go out of the house. I've got to try and stop him from going out of the house. How can I even do that without him getting distressed? You know, so it's so extreme, the difference.
Wow.
It's, and you know, like you say, hats off to the wayfinders and the operational team, because they do an amazing job in terms of managing those situations, hearing those things, and then putting in place some real practical things that enable people to cope during this time.
And one really exciting thing was we got a sizable anonymous check. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, it hit at the right time, if you like, because of course part of the planning we were trying to do at the time was around the financial position and trying to consider what that might look like. It also hit at a time when things were bleak.
Yeah.
You know, and the fact that it was an anonymous CAF check.
So what does CAF mean?
Sorry, it's the Charities Action Fund.
Right.
But basically it's a organisation who pay money to charities. It's basically like having a checkbook that's anonymous.
Wow. Okay.
So you don't have to sign it, but you can say, here, I want to give Dementia Support £10,000, as this one was. Totally ridiculous. It was completely emotional. It was
Great. And then we had BBC South came and did a bit of an interview here outside because obviously they weren't allowed inside.
It was peculiar.
Yeah, I mean, so they turned up, they weren't allowed in, which meant you had to do the whole interview outside, and it was a really windy day.
Thank you for mentioning that.
No worries. but we, in the same thing, our customers who are amazing, we were able to talk to Martha, who's head of Sage House here. She got in contact with one of our customers, got them on Zoom. The reporter was able to do an interview with them on Zoom.
Yeah.
And all around the importance of what Sage House brings to our customers, which that anonymous £10,000 enabled, which is what us being here is enabling, what people at home working, being wayfinders, befriending, data entry is enabling people to do. So week 2, it hasn't been a great week. You had a meeting with West Sussex, Carers Support West Sussex. What happened there?
What we were starting to do at that point was to think forward a little and to think about what is it that people are, what some of the really awful scenarios actually that people are going to be faced with that they're going to need help with at the end of this. And that's when we started talking about people who had gone into residential or nursing care as a result of COVID, and we had 6 customers here that suddenly their carers felt that for this period of time they weren't going to be able to manage, so because Daybreaks was shut they put them into residential and nursing care. And then we were starting to hear about COVID hitting some of the residential and nursing homes, and then how that impacts somebody, because at the same time, remember, we were starting to hear about, and it is miserable to think about, but that was the point in time we were starting to hear about how people couldn't go to funerals. People couldn't sit with their loved ones as they were passing away. And that was the conversation I was having with the chief executive at Carers Support West Sussex, was how on earth, what can we do to support these people going forward? Because the phrase is unprecedented, and I think by this point I was already truly fed up with that word, but it was actually completely valid because we'd never had to do anything like it. It's a level of emotional support and counselling that we didn't know how we were going to manage. And I suppose that's the point. We were starting to have those thoughts and thinking, okay, how can we galvanise what we do and turn it into something that's going to be truly beneficial to that group of customers going forward and those carers going forward.
So I guess last question is, I think everyone who was going to work from home and started to go from working from home, where were you at that point, do you think?
I think it was becoming very apparent that this wasn't going to go away anytime soon, and I suppose for me, I just thought, what can I do then? What can I do? Because there's all these lovely people, and as I say, I'd only been here for 3 months, but I felt like it felt like a year. Like I really felt like I got to know some of them. What can we do for these people so they still feel that they've got Sage House has got their back and they've got somewhere to come back to when it does end. So that's all I was thinking really. What can I do every day when I come in?
And I think, it was that realisation thing. I think also what started to happen towards the end of that second week though was that there were glimmers of hope isn't the right word, and that sounds awful, but there were glimmers of normality starting to appear. And in a way that was positive, but then made you start questioning that as well, in terms of, is that okay? And I think that's what then probably week 3 you start to see, is that actually okay, we've gone from realisation to normality. I don't want this to feel normal.
Oh, I think that's a really great place to end it. I think week 2, probably agreed, was probably one of our lowest weeks in this journey so far. But then positively, week 3, as you just said, gets better. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll get week 3 out very quickly. Thank you. Cool.
My foot's gone to sleep.